Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to day 3 of Congressman Hank Johnson's 4-day series grants workshop. We trust that you've enjoyed the first 2 days, and today will be no different. Today, you're going to have a chance to learn about potential grant opportunities from a lot of our experts out in the field. At this time, without no further ado, I want to introduce our host, our Congressman Hank Johnson. Congressman.
Thank you, Eric, and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to day 3 of my annual grants workshop. By now, most of you know me. For those of you who do not, I am Congressman Hank Johnson, representing Georgia's 4th Congressional District in the United States Congress. I hope that you have been able to gain valuable information during this grants series. On day 1, we heard from Emory University about how to write a grant proposal. And on day 2, STAND Incorporated, one of the most successful nonprofit organizations in this district, as well as the EPA, provided essential tips for successfully submitting a grant application. Today, as we celebrate day 3 of our week of helping other people elevate, we're going to hear from the Department of Justice, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and the Environmental Protection Agency as they share current grant opportunities that organizations and municipalities may apply for. On Monday, I said that the number 1 reason for which organizations do not receive federal grants is because they do not know how to write a grant proposal. The second reason organizations aren't awarded grant funding is because they are unaware of what grants are available. It's simple. You cannot be awarded a federal grant if you do not submit a grant proposal, and you cannot submit a proposal of a specific grant if you are unaware of its existence. For that reason, I would like to thank HUD, DOJ, and the EPA for your willingness to participate in today's session. And I'll turn it now over to Mr. Jason Becker with HUD. Mr. Becker.
Thank you, Congressman. I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We've got a little presentation, and I will discuss a little bit about HUD, what we do at Community Planning Development, and how we can assist you some open. It's going to take a second. Sorry, y'all. Let's see if this works. By the way, can anyone see my presentation? Doesn't seem like it's working.
Got it now.
Okay. All right. So we'll do this. And here we go. Okay. Again, everyone, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to everyone. Here at Community Planning Development, we're with HUD. It is, there we go. So just a little bit about me, just so you have an idea of what where I'm coming from. My name is Jason Becker. I have about 20 years experience in the government and nonprofit organizations. Before this, I was working with the city of Atlanta as the compliance manager for government grants. Before that, I was a senior compliance and training officer with Habitat for Humanity International, working on nationwide programs with HUD for SHOP and NSP, and some international projects as well. I've done CDBG, which we'll talk about in a second, and I've been here with HUD about 4 years. My previous federal government experience was working for Senator Bill Nelson of Florida, who's now the administrator of NASA. So let's see. So who we are. CPD is Community Planning and Development. being kind of the developer. So what we provide is a lot of grant opportunities, both entitlement grants, those go directly to communities. For instance, DeKalb County, the city of Atlanta, Fulton County, the state of Georgia. Then we also have additional grant opportunities for nonprofit organizations that can provide services to the community. We try to really develop an efficient way to increase the living conditions for our members of our community that's through housing. When I say community development, that also includes, roads, sewers, fire stations, police stations, schools, community centers, as well as job and economic opportunities. Part of our purview with community development, community planning and development, is that we have some guidelines where when we're working that so
Jason, you're going in and out.
I am okay. I apologize. I don't have any problems here, but I will speak up a little louder, just in case it's an issue. Actually, hold on one second. Let me see if I can't fix that. All right, sorry about that. I'm thinking my wife will be able to fix it in a second. So we've got those sort of things, and we provide economic opportunities and grant opportunities to local individuals and nonprofits. So some of our CPD highlights.
Mr. Becker, because you're going in and out, you may want to turn your video off, and then that way just share your screen.
Gotcha. I will do that. Let me end the slideshow. Let me stop sharing, and then let me share my screen. Entire screen, share. And we will go back. There we go. Okay. Hopefully that'll work. So I'm going to talk about one that's a current opportunity right now, and then I'm going to talk to some other projects that will open up in the fall. We have a rotational basis when we produce grants. A lot of it has to do with funding, when it can be allocated, and how the partner agency at headquarters can open those grants. So the very first thing I'm going to talk about is this new grant opportunity we have that is concerned about veterans housing. It's a new pilot program that is going to rehab and or modify housing for veterans. The grant opportunity is up to $1 million each. And this is really, like it says on the screen, a pilot program that we're looking to work with the VA to hopefully have great benefit with the inclusion of nonprofit organizations, so we can rehab and modify primary residence of veterans. If you're already not aware, we have other projects that we work with the VA on. We have HUD-VASH, which HUD-VASH is a partnership with the VA where we take housing choice vouchers, which a lot of people know as Section 8, and we work with the VA for low-income homeless veterans. The VA provides the housing counseling, the counseling type things, or supportive services, and we provide the voucher to get the veteran in homes. This project is looking at nonprofits that can rehab and modify housing, so stuff where veterans are already in housing, but maybe it's substandard, or if they've got a disability, they need a ramp or accessibility for light switches or something in a bathroom. And so we're looking for folks that are going to step up, apply to the program. So real quick, this is a brand new thing, but if you go look right there, you can just go on to grants.gov, do a quick search. That's the link there. But if you look at that Federal Register number, FR 6700 N39, that's the grant opportunity. It ends at the end of the month. That's one that we currently have. And this is something that we're looking at hopefully implementing nationwide going forward. But in this pilot program, we're trying to take a few on to see what we can do. As you guys, everyone's aware, we have a large veteran population in this country that have needs, low income or with disabilities that we want to serve. And this is a great opportunity for nonprofit organizations that do rehab and or modifications to homes to provide those services. And it can be a stepping stone on a much bigger project. And we're really looking forward to it. The next opportunity I'm going to talk about is the National Homeless Data and Analyst Grant. This is something we do yearly, and it really has to do with capturing data of the homeless population that we serve in our communities. So a little sidestep, we have these organizations around the state of Georgia called Continuum of Cares. There's one in DeKalb County. There's one in the city of Atlanta, directly in the city of Atlanta. There's one in Fulton County. DeKalb County and Fulton County run their own. The city of Atlanta has another organization that does theirs. There's one in Athens and Augusta. And then the state of Georgia has their own. So the DeKalb County one would handle everything in unincorporated DeKalb County. And then the state would go in things like Rockdale or Newton County. They provide those services. But the biggest thing for this grant is having an organization, a nonprofit, run and set up the homeless management information system we call HMIS. And the reason why HMIS is important is it kind of ties everything together. We have a lot of organizations that provide a lot of things, and we want to make sure that the right organization providing the right service gets to the right individual that can do the most good. And this allows organizations to share information, collect data. When we have that data, part of our job for our government is to understand, who we're helping, how we're helping them, how many people we're helping them, the type of families. Are they a single individual? Are they single, parent households? Are they two-parent intact family households that have multiple children? And that data derives the type of help assistance we can give. And so this is something that comes up every year and that we kind of put together. So there are some highlights, as mentioned, it helps us support what we do. There's something every year called the point in time count. If you may have seen that we have every year, usually around January, February, where it's, lack of a better term, a census of homeless individuals in our communities. This allows us to target the type of assistance we can give. And we have a lot of nonprofit organizations that help with that. It helps with funding. It helps with knowing where people are, what kind of services they need, and if that population has shifted or changed. And so that part of this, the homeless HMIS system, goes with that hand in hand. And so we have SAGE, which is a reporting system that we do. And by putting all these things together, having nonprofit organizations that step up to run this program, we can understand fully the type of assistance we need in the communities. And so this isn't open yet, but it happens towards the later of the year, but it's something to be aware of. Along those same lines, if you're an organization that provides services like that, and you don't have a current grant under the continuum of care that provides rental assistance, permanent supportive housing, counseling, that sort of thing, and you want to do that, then you can contact your local continuum of care, and we can talk about it a little later, or the state of Georgia, and try to apply for a grant that way as well. So finally, we have the Youth Demonstration Housing Program. And this is something, again, that will open up later in the year. But this is specific to providing assistance to homeless youth. this was a pilot program a few years ago. We've kind of moved along, and it's gotten bigger and bigger. And our whole goal is to just support homeless youth to get them stabilized and on their way. And sometimes this ends up being, we have a lot of youth who age out of the foster care system at the age of 18, but are still in school. And this is a population that this grant has helped as well. And this just isn't, as we talk about HUD, a lot of times it's urban. This grant is rural and suburban and urban areas across the country that we're trying to help prevent and end youth homelessness. And so it's something that it's going to be a little farther in the year to apply for, but we really talk about nonprofit organizations that can build systems to end homelessness. We talk about, through this demonstration program, just a wide range of things that we can do to provide. As we talk about rapid rehousing, we have organizations that have maybe leasing where they have 2 or 3 apartments that they're supporting, and that they can pull somebody off the street, rapidly rehouse them into an apartment a little bit, get them stabilized and move along. We have permanent supportive housing. That's what it sounds like, permanent place for someone to live, but we have supportive housing to help them with the needs they need. And then transitional housing in homes. So all those things are involved. So if you're a nonprofit organization, a church, that sort of thing, that think that they can provide those type of services, something like this grant can help you provide that service in your community. So this type of thing will open later in the year, but we do funding for housing units, so rental assistance or leasing services. When we talk about wraparound services and housing support, we're talking about getting those individuals the things they need. Maybe it's job training. Maybe it's trying to help them get an identification card, transportation issues, that sort of thing. But this one specifically is to support youth. We're really trying to work on that way. And then when we talk about coordinated entry systems, that goes with the HMIS system that we talked about earlier. Coordinated entry, a lot of counties or states that have continuum of care organizations, and I specifically work with the city of Atlanta. So the Gateway Center, that's downtown, that is their coordinated entry center. So they try to get everybody to go through that initially, so they can gain the information they need, and then relay that information to the organization that can best provide the support for that individual or family. And by using the coordinated entry system, the nonprofits that if you apply to these programs will be easily available to provide services much faster, and you can keep track on what you're doing and how you're doing it. And as I mentioned, we just using this to try to end homelessness for youth. But this opens up in the light of the year. Folks will probably talk about it later, but if you go to grants.gov to the website, you can just do a search for housing or for HUD. You'll pull up things right now. Right now, we have, at the current moment, we have very few that are open to anyone to apply. A lot of our grants that we have open right now are specifically for public housing. So, but there's a couple of nonprofit ones that are open to nonprofits. But if you check usually periodically, a couple times a month, they'll pop up and you'll be able to do that. So finally, I'll just leave my contact information here. If you ever need anything, my information's here. You can type it down, send me an email. We'll put you together with the correct individuals. We have a lot of folks. We work all over the state. Normally, my director would be here, but she's actually out in the field meeting with nonprofit organizations in Augusta today. So we just have a great office. We all have a passion to try to end homelessness, to provide better communities and infrastructure into our communities. So just be aware that we're here to help. And then you can always go to the hudexchange.info. And by doing that, you'll find a lot of information that you can on HUD itself, the type of grants we have, both entitlement grants that Congress provides an allotment every single year. And we have a formula that figures out, how much does DeKalb County get compared to somewhere else. And then also the grant opportunities for nonprofit organizations. But I will be around at the end to answer any questions there may be during the question and answer session. And I really do appreciate the time you've given me. And just know that here at HUD, we really do have a passion of working in our communities to end homelessness and provide better communities for our constituents. And I will pass it on. So I'm going to pull up Eric. Do I need to throw it to you?
Thank you. So DOJ, you're up next.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you so much, Congressman, for the opportunity to share our grants. I'm Linda Fan, and I'm with the Office on Violence Against Women and with the Department of Justice. And today I'm going to share a little bit about our grant opportunities. Also, when is the time that we put our grants out, and then additionally, I'll give some tips as well in terms of preparing to apply for our grants. Prior to coming to the Department of Justice, I was in the domestic violence and sexual assault field and worked in nonprofits, actually ran a nonprofit for a good 13 years. So I absolutely understand the sometimes a lot of organizations don't know where to look for funding. And then additionally, a lot of the grant processes out there can be absolutely mind-boggling in terms of understanding how to apply for funding. So if you have any questions at all, feel free after this presentation to reach out to us. At OVW, we are an office full of advocates and allies. We've been in the field and we care deeply about the issues we work on. So just moving on to our office, essentially we provide leadership in developing the nation's capacity to address domestic violence, sexual assault, dating violence, and stalking. And since our office has come into inception since 1995, and our office was created because of the Violence Against Women's Act. And over this period of time, we have administered over $9 billion in funding. And the office itself we currently administered 19 grant programs, but due to the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women's Act, we are now adding more programs. And then additionally, there has also been higher levels of authorizations and in our budget as well. So currently right now, we are pushing out $700 million for communities, for nonprofits, and for states to ensure that everyone has the appropriate resources and tools to combat these violent crimes. So every few years, we put out some office-wide priorities and goals. Initially, what these are is really just our targets when we're looking at making investments in communities. And so we want our funding to really improve access to justice for all survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. And we do this by advancing equity in underserved and historically marginalized communities. This means funding organizations that are by and for communities. And we know that there are many organizations out there that perhaps have to reach communities and survivors who may have barriers to access, whether it's language or if there are certain institutional barriers. So we definitely want to prioritize those organizations. And then also we want to address sexual assault in a much more meaningful way. For some of you who are familiar about these issues, there is a lot of support and funding. There's never enough. There is never enough support and funding for domestic violence and sexual assault. However, a lot of the funding has been geared more to domestic violence work. And so we want to be intentional and make sure that we make meaningful investments when it comes to sexual assault issues, especially when it comes to non-intimate partner sexual assault. The next priority for us is also, oh, it looks like my screen is not on. So I apologize for that. Let me go ahead and add. Let's see here. All right. Can you see my screen now? And hopefully it's on the correct screen. All right, thank you. And thanks for asking. So let's see here. The next priority for us is, of course, making sure that we expand economic justice and financial advocacy for survivors. We know that survivors, survivors are not coming in just for sexual assault and domestic violence and counseling, right? We don't live non-intersectional lives. Many survivors need to make sure, in order to leave an abusive home, that there is support for them to be able to put food on the table and take care of their children and their families, that they're able to pay for their rent, or perhaps they need to get to a job. And so one of the things we try to do is make sure that we're able to provide survivors those resources and their tools to ensure their self-sufficiency. And then our last priority, and it's really a cross-cutting priority and goal for all of our grants, is to really support and honor tribal sovereignty. And that is to appropriately hold our federal trust responsibilities, and additionally provide federally recognized tribes the support that they need when it comes to the criminal justice system, or ensuring, the well-being of domestic violence, sexual assault survivors. Okay, moving on to our next slide here. Who should apply and when? We encourage community-based nonprofit organizations to apply, units of government, law enforcement, higher learning institution, of course, tribes and tribal organizations. And then a lot of our funding do go to states in the form of formula grants. And I'll go into that a little bit later. And then as to when you should expect for solicitations to drop, it's usually between November to March. And when in a moment, I'll put it in the chat, or one of my colleagues will put in a link where you can sign up to get notifications when those solicitations are being released. Okay. So let me go into a little bit about our grant programming. We provide two types of grants. One, it's our formula grant programs. And formula grants is how I like to explain this is we have our states and our territories, and they will apply directly to us for funding. And based on percentages tied to population and other factors, we distribute funding to the states, who therefore take that funding and then move it to sub-grantees within the states and territories. And so you are able to apply for some of this formula funding through the state administrators. And the easiest way to go about finding out who your state administrator is going to our website. And we do have a link there where you can click on, go to the state or territory you reside in. And then there'll be information, their contact information. You can connect with them, and they will be able to provide you the information on how to apply for our formula funding. We have 4 formula grants. I'm going to focus primarily on 2 of them. And One of them is the Stop Violence Against Women Formula Grant, also the Sexual Assault Services Formula Grant. And then the other two is really more focused on coalitions. And these are considered more like member associations that really represent shelters, rape crisis centers. But for today's purposes, I do want to bring your attention to the STOP funding. Now, STOP funding funds law enforcement, prosecution, courts, victim services, and then we allow for 15% of 15% of that funding to be discretionary for the states. So they can determine how that funding moves within their state. And then additionally, I do want to draw your attention to the 30% to victim services. For many organizations out there, this is such a critical piece of their of their work. 10% of that 30%, we do ask states to make sure that there's a set aside for culturally specific organizations. So if you're a culturally specific organization in this in Georgia and you need the support, I highly encourage you to reach out to your state administrator and ask about that set aside. Okay. Then now we have our sexual assault formula grant. And this particular grant, again, it's a formula grant that goes to the states. If you would like to apply for one, if you're working with a rape crisis center, or if you're a rape crisis center, or you provide services for sexual assault survivors, then I encourage you to, again, to connect with your grant administrator and apply as a subgrantee. And I'm going to leave this slide here for a little bit, but we'll drop this in the chat so that you can have it to look up your state administrators. Okay. The next type of grant is our discretionary grants. Now, we currently administer 14 discretionary grants. We will be adding more for FY23. And again, that's due to the recent reauthorization of VAWA. But discretionary grants really focus in on specific needs and populations. So we have grants that cover programs on campus. We have grants that we put out there to ensure that courts are appropriately addressing these issues. We also have multiple culturally specific grants as well. That's really focused on communities that are underserved or within historically marginalized communities. And again, for organizations that are buy-in for. Additionally, we have grants that, that focus in on transitional housing and legal services, two areas that we see high demand across the nation. When it comes to needs for survivors. And then, of course, we also have, and especially in Georgia, we do have grants that focusing in on rural communities as well. So many of these grants opportunities, again, they are all on our website. So I encourage you to go and they have very specific information on what are some of the requirements for the grants, what they fund, and then of course what they don't fund. So I encourage you to visit there. And of course, you can always reach out to get information. And some of the funded activities, direct services, I mentioned earlier, legal assistance. We do fund a lot of training, crisis intervention, and of course, prevention work. Okay. I won't go into too much detail about our specific grants, but I'll just highlight a few that are, as I mentioned, are commonly asked for. So our legal assistance for victims program, These are putting legal programs in organizations that can directly support survivors, whether it's helping folks get protective orders, whether it is to get access to, support with divorces. And so this is a particular program that is highly competitive. However, because we know about the competitive nature and the needs for this, we actually put out a different initiative under the same program that's really focused on smaller community-based organizations. And it's called Expanding Legal Assistance for Victims Initiative. And so this is a grant program that I encourage folks to take a look at, because there is a capacity building component built into it, because we know smaller organizations need time to build up their capacity to have a legal assistance program. We know it takes time to hire someone. So we encourage smaller organizations to look at that particular initiative. And again, that will be on our website. And another grant that I would like to, of course, highlight is our culturally specific service programs. Again, these are for smaller community-based organizations that are by and for the community. We have an underserved program as well that works with underserved populations. And this could be the LGBTQ population, those with disabilities, even though we do have a separate disabilities grant, those who identify as being part of a religious minority. And so there is some flexibility under the underserved grant. We also have grants tied to abuse later in life for those who are older than 50 years of age. So as you can see, many of our grant programs are very targeted to specific communities and needs. And the last one that I'll highlight, of course, is our grants that are coming out of our Tribal Affairs Division. So we do support tribes in shoring up their criminal justice responses, whether it's within our tribal governments program. We also have a tribal jurisdiction program that really looks at special criminal jurisdiction when it comes to tribal issues, and of course, sexual assault services. And additionally, the last type of grant I will mention is we do have a research and evaluation grant. So if you're interested, if you are part of a higher institution or you're interested in research issues, we do have our research and evaluation grant. And then we also provide grants to technical assistance providers. And so these technical assistance providers help support our grantees to be successful in their work. Okay, tips for applying. Some pro tips. Sign up for their notifications. You'll get them whenever we release our grants, you'll be notified quickly. And then, of course, look at our website. Once we know when we're releasing a grant, we will post it in advance. So you can take that time to prepare. Look at our old solicitations. Our old solicitations are all on our website. We're not very creative from one year to another. And so if you look at our old solicitations, you'll pretty much know, for the upcoming year, unless there's been some statutory changes, it's pretty much the same. So you'll see the same questions. You'll kind of get a feel for, what are the things we're looking for? What are things and documents you need to pull together to prepare? And then this always takes time, but, if you don't have a SAM number yet, go to just, apply for that, go to just grants and grants.gov. And that way, or I'm sorry, to grants.gov and, start start getting registered for those systems, because you'll need to register for those systems in order to apply for our grants. And one more pro tip I'd like to tell everybody is that if you have expertise in these issues of domestic violence, sexual assault, dating violence, or stalking, we actually encourage you to apply to be a peer reviewer. There's several advantages here. The first one, of course, is that you will, we definitely, you'll get paid. You'll get paid for reviewing grants, but we also appreciate the expertise of those out there, because it helps with informing how we make those investments. We rely on peer reviewers who have professional skills and backgrounds and know what's happening in the field to inform us. The other advantage is, if you're a peer reviewer, you know exactly how these grants are being vetted and reviewed. And so, as I mentioned, I used to be a former grantee, and I was a peer reviewer. So that really helped me understand the process. All right. And then a couple of last items to consider, of course, is really understanding, going back and understanding the solicitations. We do have some training resources on our website, so I encourage you to come and check those out. And then, again, if you have partners, if you know that these grants are going to be dropped down the line, develop your partnerships now, because that will definitely help you, because we do look across the board when it comes to, when we're investing in communities, what are the partnerships on the ground? And here is my information. I've also put contact information for my colleagues, Vanessa Esposito, who is on this call as well, and Erica Lacey. There are outreach specialists. They will be able to assist you with any questions you may have. And then, of course, you can reach out to me. Here's some links to not only our grant programs, but also how to become a peer reviewer. And then additionally, follow us on LinkedIn. And we post a lot of our grant funding there, in addition to any new news that come out of OVW. And that concludes my presentation. And I'm going to try to close this so that I'm not sharing anymore. Well, I'll try to. Candace, if there's a way for you to just kick me off, feel free to do so.
Yes, I am.
Okay, great.
Okay, who's next for the DOJ?
Hi, Candace. That's me, Vince Davenport. Okay. Well, first off, I want to thank Congressman Johnson for this opportunity. I didn't know this was an annual event, so now I feel like I'm under pressure to make sure I get invited again next year. So, I'm going to be as focused as I can. And Congressman, I just want you to know what a pleasure it's been working with Candace and kind of organizing this, getting us together. She's been really fantastic and one of the nicest people I've met in Washington. So thank you for that. All right. So I had to start a timer because once I get talking about the Bureau of Justice Assistance and our work here around public safety in the criminal justice system, I can get going. So I'm going to be very mindful of the time. I won't be able to hit on a lot of details about a lot of programs, and that's fine. I think the first thing I just want you to know out of the gate that if you're on this call, there's a 99% chance that you are eligible for funding from the Office of Justice Programs. So let me start out my presentation so you can follow along. Let me start up my PowerPoint. And okay, one second. All right. So I'm going to be talking a lot about the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and we live inside of the Office of Justice Programs. And so I won't belabor a lot of the points on these slides, but this is Amy Solomon. She's our Assistant Attorney General that oversees this. And here are all the offices that are within the Office of Justice Programs. So if you think about the Department of Justice, it's a really, really big department. And the Office of Justice Programs is the largest grant-making entity within DOJ with regard to criminal justice and public safety. So just know that and kind of tuck that away. Within the Bureau of Justice Assistance, this is our director, Carlton Moore. He's fantastic. And our goal is really to help make communities safer, period. And we want to strengthen the criminal justice system across the board. So wherever you fit into the criminal justice system, whether it's in courts, corrections, law enforcement, community activists, community entity, nonprofit, we have programs to support you regardless of what your role is. And my colleagues that have spoken before me talked a little bit about the difference between discretionary grants and formula grants. I won't spend a lot of time on formula. These are some really big grants that are given out to the states, and then the states kind of push that money out to local jurisdictions based on criteria that they set. I'm going to talk a lot about some of our discretionary programs because these are funds that you should be considering and you should be applying for based on where you fit along this public safety continuum. Our biggest program is the Burn JAG, and this is the big formula program. So you're going to hear this. If you haven't heard this term before, if you're involved in the grant making space, you're going to hear the term JAG, Burn Memorial Justice Assistance Grant. And just know that if you can imagine it along the public safety continuum, there's funding for it under Burn JAG. Burn JAG is very, very broad, but this is, again, primarily distributed through the states. And here's what that means to you. If you don't know who your state administering agency is or official is, you need to find out. And as my colleague said during her previous presentation, we have a list on our website as well. So even if you're not eligible as a direct recipient of this, you should be in communication with the state office. Let them know who you are. Let them know what your concerns are, what your issues are, so that when they're making funding decisions about this state formula money, big pots of money that come through the states, that you're on their radar and that they know that you have an interest in whatever it is that you have an interest in. Another program I just want to kind of flag, and again, it's going to be a little scattershot. I'm just going to hit some high points on a few programs that I think kind of reflect the general nature of our work here at the Bureau of Justice Assistance. I just want to give you a flavor for it, and then hopefully just to kind of spur your kind of imagination and to let you know the wide range of programs that are out there. If you care about school safety, which I know we all do, there's funding to support school violence prevention programs. And here at the Bureau of Justice Assistance, we have grants that schools are eligible for to implement comprehensive school prevention and security measures. And there's also another companion program that the COPS office is going to talk about in a minute. So just here's the takeaway for this program. School safety is an area where there's funding that's available. And so if this interests you, just know that on our website, there's details about that. And at the end of my presentation, I'm going to kind of give you some tips on what you should think about when you're applying. Justice and mental health collaboration, and opioid, stimulants, and substance abuse. So these all fall under our behavioral health portfolio. There is no community out here that's not struggling when it comes to behavioral health issues, with people who are either struggling from mental health issues, people who are struggling from substance use disorder. Like these are in almost every community that I've seen across the country. These are underlying drivers that drive public safety issues. And they also, as we all know, I mean, they just destroy people. They destroy families. I have a brother that's in prison and has been a substance user for 40 years. And, it's like it is on my family. It's tough. Everybody has their issues, and it destroys families. It destroys communities. It doesn't just impact the person that's involved, whether they're suffering from mental health issues or from substance use issues. So these programs, these are two of our biggest programs, our behavioral health programs. And so, for example, I'm just going to give an example on the opioid stimulants and substance use program. If you are a local jurisdiction, let's say you're a city, county, unit of local government, and you've got some ideas on how you could spend $1 million, $2 million, or whatever to have an impact in terms of mitigating the impacts of these problems. If you've got some ideas that you think would fit into kind of this broader approach that under the umbrella of public safety to kind of attack this problem, these are very broad programs. You can basically apply for funding, describe the issue that you're dealing with, describe the ideas that you have in terms of how the funding could be used to make the problem better or to mitigate the impacts of these problems, and you submit the grant. And the opioid stimulant and substance use program, I just want to give you an example of how big these programs and how there's a good chance that you could get funded. So this is about a $200 million program, and I think most of the awards come in, or most of the requests come in for $500,000, $1 million, or $1.5 million. And of everybody that applied for this program last year, almost 50% received funding. So think about that. If you take the time, and it does take a little time, it's not as difficult. You don't have to be a professional grant writer to do this. But if you take the time and you submit an application to attack this substance use issue in your community, there's a 50-50 chance, at least based on our applications and our funding last year, that you would have received funding. And so the key takeaway here is that behavioral health issues are a major problem, whether you're in a small community, a rural community, or a big city. These are major problems, and Congress has the foresight to provide this funding. We have the privilege of administering it, and so I guess my takeaway here is take advantage of it, apply for it, and if you do, there's a decent chance, at least as I think about it, for you to receive funding. Justice and mental health collaboration, this is another area where if you're thinking about all the different ways that law enforcement, for example, interacts with people who are struggling from mental health issues or who may be in crisis, maybe you have some ideas for how your law enforcement agency can better respond to or handle these types of situations, let us know what your ideas are. Put them in a grant application and tell us how they fit into kind of a broader picture and vision that the city, the county, or the jurisdiction has for dealing with public safety. And again, these are really big programs, and we're always looking for innovation. We're looking to fund programs that make sense. And so you don't have to be a creative grant writer. You don't have to be a professional grant writer. You just have to tell your story. You have to tell us what the problem is and tell us who you are, and demonstrate that you have the capacity to take this money, put the money to good use to attack these problems. And so this behavioral health category, it's a really big area, and it's something that we feel really strongly about. Public safety, as we look at it through our lens, public safety is a civil right. And these two particular areas, whether it's mental health issues or substance use, issues related to substance use, these are real issues that affect real families, real communities. And so just know that there's money here, there's funding here to support whatever ideas you have and to support ongoing efforts that you are already involved with at the local level. And even though these last few programs I talked about, I'm going to back up. These programs I've talked about, the eligible applicants here typically are units of government, whether it's a city, a county, a township, a police department, a health department. And these are the eligible applicants here. However, just because you may be not part of a nonprofit organization or a community violence intervention entity, even though you may not be eligible as a direct applicant, you can go to your police department. You can go to your health department. You can say, hey, BJA, the Bureau of Justice Assistance, has these programs. We would like to partner with you. You could be a sub-recipient, even though you cannot be a direct recipient. And some grants are different. Some grants, nonprofits can be a direct recipient. Some grants you can't. But just because you can't, in some cases, because some grants are geared towards government, you can certainly go talk to your government and you can let them know, hey, I want to be part of this. Can you apply for this and let us support the effort? So just keep that in mind as well. Community violence intervention, this is a huge part of what BJA is involved with today. And community violence intervention really is this idea that public safety can only be achieved through police community partnerships. If the community is not involved and not playing a direct role, and in many cases a lead role in developing solutions to public safety issues, especially violent crime, then like you're never going to make a lot of headway. And one of the things that we've all learned in the last 3 years since the murder of George Floyd is that the people have spoken. And what the people have said is that everybody wants to have a say in how they're policed, period. And it's crystal clear that communities want to have a voice, they deserve to have a voice, and they really deserve to have a seat at the table in terms of developing strategies to address violent crime and other public safety issues. And so we have fantastic grant programs for community-based organizations. So if you are part of a community-based organization and you're passionate about some aspect of public safety or the criminal justice system, just know that our community violence intervention program is probably one of the first things you should check out on our website, because typically we try to be as free-flowing as we can and as flexible as we can in terms of building these programs in a way so that it's not one size fits all. We know that local public safety and criminal justice issues, even though there are big topics that we all share across the country, they can look different in your community and they can look different in your neighborhood. And so we build these programs with a great deal of flexibility. So if you're working with a nonprofit that has some really good violence disruptors in there, you've got these solid, credible messengers, they're doing good work to identify, issues that are happening in the neighborhood to try to prevent them from blowing up into full-scale violent issues, just know that there's funding for that. And the amount of funding, it varies depending upon what it is that you're proposing. But this is a really important part of what the Bureau of Justice Assistance is doing right now. And so I just want to make sure that if you're in the nonprofit community violence intervention space, like you should for sure be familiar with all of the resources that BJA has under this umbrella. All right, next, body-worn cameras. This is, again, it's just it's kind of a staple program. We've had this program for a while, and the Bureau of Justice Assistance helps police departments buy cameras. And that's an easy way to look at it, but that's not our only interest. We make investments, we help agencies buy body-worn cameras, but at the same time, we also help them to develop comprehensive implementation strategies. It's not enough to have cameras and to give them to your officers. You have to have policies that promote transparency, that promote accountability, where you account for situations and you describe under when do we release film to the public or footage to the public? How do we share body-worn camera footage with our courts, with our prosecutors? We help police departments when we give them this funding to develop comprehensive body-worn camera implementation policies, again, because we know how difficult public safety is. We know that there are so many elements and facets to this that you've got to be thoughtful. We can't just give away equipment and hope that people go forth and do good. So that's why we provide them with really substantial resources, and we require them to build a plan that really accounts for transparency, accountability, digital evidence management, evidence sharing. And so there's a lot that's happening in this space right now. And so if you're if you work for a city or a county that has a law enforcement agency and you're in the market for body-worn cameras, know that we can support those purchases. But even if you're not looking to buy cameras, our people that we have that work in this space, they're good. They can help you work for no charge on policies. We can evaluate your existing policies and help you to understand where we may think there could be some other opportunities for transparency and accountability. So whether you get a grant from us or not in most of these topic areas, we do have subject matter experts that we can make available free of no charge to help you with that as well. This is I also wanted to share with you, we have a really important officer safety and wellness program. It's named in honor of Sergeant Robert Wilson. He was a Philly cop who was gunned down and murdered trying to stop an armed robbery of a video store. And this is a really important program, and I'll tell you why. Because we've all been through a lot these last few years, and even before these last few years, being a law enforcement officer, it's tough. I mean, it's hard. And I think one of the things that we've all kind of come to appreciate these last few years is that most communities, they don't want fewer law enforcement officers. They want better law enforcement officers. And when it comes to wellness, of officer wellness, like our position is that the wellness of officers and wellness of communities are linked. Like, this is a shared destiny. In order for a community to be well, and to be safe, officers have to be well and be safe, and vice versa. So we just see that officer safety and wellness is such an important part of good public safety, because we know that it's inextricably linked with community safety. And one thing I want to flag here is that we have a brand new program at the bottom of the slide here called Safer Together. And it's exactly what it sounds like. When officers are safe, communities are safe. When communities are safe, officers are safe. And this program, it's a fantastic new program. It's 8 hours of training for frontline law enforcement officers, where we help teach them specific skills and strategies to mitigate the impact of stress on every call that they go on. But also, we help them to understand that one of the most important things that happens in the course of their daily duties is the next interaction. Every interaction matters in terms of that officer's ability to cast the department and this profession in the most favorable light, and to ensure that communities and police are working together. So I just want to flag that for you. I'll just tease it. I won't get into a lot of detail on there, but Safer Together is a fantastic new program, and we would love to bring that to the 4th District, to any law enforcement agency that wants it. Next, I'm not going to spend much time at all in this program. Just know that we have a lot of different forensic programs here at the Bureau of Justice Assistance to promote crime labs, police departments, I'm just going to leave that there because I want to reserve the rest of my time for other issues, but just know that that's a huge part of what we offer here at the Bureau of Justice Assistance. The last 2 things I'm going to talk about is NTAC. It's our National Training and Technical Assistance Center, and we offer no-cost training and technical assistance on every single topic you can think of. If it's related to criminal justice, and you're involved in the criminal justice space, and you're trying to make your community safer, but you just need some additional resources, some guidance, some expertise, you can call us, and we will find the subject matter experts. We'll find ways to support whatever it is that you're trying to do. And so we don't, oftentimes a lot of the requests revolve around violent crime, supporting law enforcement. We talk about combating victimization and a lot of different areas, but basically your imagination is the limit. Just know that if you need technical assistance or training on any topic across the criminal justice continuum, chances are we've got a subject matter expert who can help you with that. And whether we got to fly them down to you, whether we got to bring you to see them or to see what they're doing in a particular community, that's a resource that we want to make available. The last thing I want to highlight is our National Law Enforcement Knowledge Lab. This is it's newly developed these last 2 years, and it's kind of a one-stop shop to help police departments understand what the boundaries are for developing constitutional policing practices across the entire agency. And so we're working hard to develop toolkits and model policies that law enforcement agencies can adopt to ensure that everything they do is really geared towards protecting the constitutional rights of the people that they serve. And really, it's around being effective and efficient, because ultimately crime is solved one way and one way only, and that's when the police and the community are working together. And so just know that the Knowledge Lab is a resource if you happen to be in that space. All right, so with that, I just want you to know that for all of the topics that I talked about, I talked from a public safety standpoint, but within the Office of Justice Programs, we have separate offices that deal specifically with juvenile justice and also crime victims. And so whatever the topic is, there's like a 99% chance we have a grant program that can help support the good work that you're already doing or that you're thinking about doing down in the 4th District. And Candace, I'll make sure, here's some basic contact information, but Candace, I'll make sure you have my contact information, my email address. Feel free to share that with everybody that's on the call. And if I can help answer questions or direct people to a resource that helps you and what you're trying to do, I'm happy to do that. So thank you very much, Congressman, for the opportunity. Candace, I'll stop sharing my screen and then you can pass it to the next.
Thank you very much. That leaves Cheryl Thomas with DOJ.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Let me just jump in right away and share my screen. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see that. Again, good afternoon. My name is Cheryl Thomas. I'm with the DOJ COPS Office, the Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services. And I'm happy to be here this afternoon to give you a little bit of background about our grants and how they work and how you can apply for them. Give me 1 second. There we go. So I'm going to move pretty quickly through the slides, but rest assured you've got access to all of them. Candace has the presentation and she can make it available after today's workshop. So you've got the slides. So don't feel like you've got to scramble to write information down or get the websites or anything like that. And if there's any questions for me as we go along, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A and I will get to them right after I'm done. And if you need to interrupt me, go ahead. So just a little bit of background about the COPS Office. We were established under the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act, the Crime Bill of 1994. And everything that the COPS Office does is geared towards advancing public safety through community policing, through the advancement of community policing, proactive, responding to fear of crime and fear of social disorder and things like that. Since 1994, when we were created, we've been appropriated more than $20 billion for a wide variety of purposes. You probably are most familiar with us for our hiring program, for hiring additional officers to add to the nation's streets. Well, we've also had a variety of other programs over the years, and I will cover what we've got available for FY23 as we go through this presentation. Again, just a little bit of background about the COPS Office. The highlight on this one is how much money we have available this year. The third bullet shows you what we've got available, a bit over $660 million. Okay, so first, just our grants, our funding is broken into three sort of buckets, is how we think of it. We've got funding for grants, training, and technical assistance, and I will cover all three of them as I go through this. For the grants, it's direct funding to law enforcement agencies and to stakeholder organizations supporting law enforcement. Our training takes a variety of different purposes, different formats. We've got in-person training, we've got online training, we've got a very robust training portal that I'll go through. We've got a huge number of topics available. And then technical assistance, similar to what you heard Vince just describe, offered by the Office of Justice Programs. The COPS Office also has a technical assistance center that covers every topic under the sun and provides free, no-cost training. So a snapshot of what we've got available in 2023, and all of our grant programs for this fiscal year have closed. Our general schedule is we usually open our programs in the spring. We wait until the budget has been passed, so it's all dependent on when that goes through. This past year in 23, the budget was passed at the end of December, so we started launching our programs around the end of March because it takes us a little time to tweak the programs from year to year based on how they've changed, what the administration wants done, what Congress has changed in the appropriations. So this is the snapshot of what we had available this year. Again, all of these programs are closed, but again, ours do not change tremendously from year to year. So we always have all of our previous solicitations available through our website. So you can always check what was done in previous years to get an idea of what the next year might look like. And I will go through each of these programs one by one. Starting with the COPS hiring program. This is what I mentioned, the largest program that we've had. It's gone by a number of different names since 1994, but currently it is the very basic and easy to remember COPS hiring program. And the entire idea of this is assisting law enforcement through hiring or rehiring career sworn full-time law enforcement officers to increase community policing capacity. All state, local, territorial, and tribal law enforcement agencies with primary law enforcement authority are eligible to apply. By primary law enforcement authority, we mean if your agency is the one that picks up the phone when someone dials 911 for service. So if your agency, responds to the 911 call, you're considered having to have primary law enforcement authority. This year, we've got $224.5 million available. Now that funding goes towards 75% of an entry-level salary and fringe benefit package for each officer position awarded. So it has a cap at $125,000. Anything else is done through a minimum cash match. You see, it's a minimum 25% cash match, unless a waiver is granted. And a waiver can be applied for where we would therefore pick up the entire cost, not just the up to the cap. If your agency has been experiencing severe fiscal distress, and there's a series of questions in the application package when you're applying for the grant, you would also, if you are suffering from severe fiscal distress and wish to apply for a waiver of the local match, that's when you would do it at that time. It's 3 years of funding. It's awarded over a 5-year period. The grant award period is 5 years because we know that agencies can't hire on day one usually. Officers need to be recruited. There's the training academy to wait through. Sometimes officers leave in the middle of the grant period and you need to pause on using the funds until you can fill the position again. So it's 3 years of funding, but it's spread out over a 5-year award period. And that's 3 years of funding. It's not $125,000 per position per year. That $125,000 per position is over the entire 3-year period. It's both for newly hired officers and for rehired officers who have been laid off already, or you have a scheduled layoff date that has been documented, that you can then use this funding to cover those positions. And we do have a 12-month retention requirement at the conclusion of the 3 years of federal funding. The idea is each year you use a little bit less of the federal funding and you absorb out of your local costs more and more of the cost of the officer positions, so that at the end of the 3 years of federal funding, your budget has slowly been able to absorb these costs so that you are able to keep the officers on in your budget. But we only require it for a 12-month period. When applying under the COPS hiring program, agencies have to identify the public safety problem that would be addressed using this funding. There were 6 areas in 2023. You'll see the first 4 are in a slightly darker shade. Those are priority consideration areas, and these are priorities that are set either by the administration or by Congress. Basically, it's considered bonus points in the application process when we're reviewing the applications, if that's where your focus is going to be in one of those first 4 areas. I'll be honest, they didn't change between 22 and 23, so chances are good that at least some of these would be repeated in 2024, but until we actually have our appropriations, we can't be certain. As I mentioned, this one is closed along with all of our other solicitations. We plan, and in case I forget to mention this for any of the other programs that I'll go through, we are planning on making award announcements for all of our grant programs for 2023 by the end of September. School Violence Prevention Program. Vince mentioned this when he was talking about BJA funding. This is the companion program that he mentioned for school safety purposes. Our funding under this program is focused on 5 key areas: coordination with law enforcement, training for law enforcement officers to prevent student violence. The third bullet there is where the majority of the requests come in. Basically, it's target hardening for metal detectors, locks, lighting, camera systems, bulletproof glass, other deterrent measures. Technology for expedited notification of law enforcement during an emergency, so panic button systems, basically. And then there's a catch-all bullet for basically any other measures that provide a significant improvement in school security. The School Violence Prevention Program does not provide funding for hiring school resource officers. If your agency is interested in hiring school resource officers, that's something you would use the COPS hiring program for. The 6th of those bullets that I've shown indicated it's sort of it was a catch-all, other innovations in policing, and school resource officers would fall under that. For the School Violence Prevention Program, awards go to states, local government, Indian tribes, and other public agencies. This is a little different from some of our other programs. School districts can apply directly for funding. We do not fund individual schools, so it can't go to just one school applying on its own unless it is the only school in the district, which is pretty unusual. So the funding can go to school districts, but it does not go to individual schools, and of course, local law enforcement. In 2023, we've got, that's a total of 73 million available. We've got 53 million through the appropriation, plus an additional 20 million through the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which was listed for the identical purposes as the School Violence Prevention Program. So it's a total of 73 million available, with a maximum of $500,000 per award. It is also a 3-year grant program. And similar to the COPS hiring program, there is a 25% cash match, unless, again, in cases of severe fiscal distress, a waiver is granted of that local match. This slide and the next one that I'll cover are our anti-drug programs. One is anti-heroin, the next one is anti-methamphetamine. And I'm just going to cover these very quickly because the funding only goes to one state-level agency. In Georgia in the past, the recipient has been the Georgia Bureau of Investigation when they've applied. But because the program is a task force structure, both anti-heroin and anti-methamphetamine, although the funding would go to the state-level agency, they're required to participate with local law enforcement agencies to partner with them on task force structures to address these anti-drug issues. So we like to make sure that local law enforcement is certainly aware of these, to definitely get involved if your state does receive funding, and to make sure that your state applies for funding. Just covering the anti-heroin program quickly, it's for investigative purposes. So it doesn't fund Narcan, it does not fund treatment issues, but it funds investigations related to distribution of heroin, fentanyl, carfentanil, illegal distribution of prescription opioids. Again, the next bullet is on state level, and local partnerships. We have 35 million available for this program in FY20. And again, the anti-methamphetamine, again, following the same structure. It's investigative in nature for precursor diversion and other investigative purposes. It does not fund cleanup, for example. These awards have an odd little twist that they've got a $1 million minimum threshold. Agencies can't apply for less than that, but it's got a maximum of $2 million per award. And this year we have 16 million available. Just a brief slide to mention that we do have funding for tribal agencies, for tribal law enforcement. That is done through the Coordinated Tribal Assistance Solicitation. COPS and OJP sort of wrap it up into one neat application package so that agencies can apply, tribal agencies can apply at the same time for purpose areas under each agency. The Collaborative Reform Initiative. This is the technical assistance part of what we've got available for the field. And like Vince said, we also have every topic. We can match you up with subject matter experts. We can point you in the right direction. It's all done through our Collaborative Reform Initiative Technical Assistance Center. And you'll have the information for all of that. It's all through our website. So that's coming up at the end of the presentation. But this can be on any topic, as I mentioned. It can be It can take on a number of different formats. We can send a subject matter expert out to your agency. We can connect you with other agencies, sort of in a peer-to-peer structure, other agencies experiencing the same type of problem. It can be simply making sure you've got the links to the right training and the right resources that you need. So that's sort of our basic entry-level technical assistance program. Again, at no cost to the field. You just contact us, and it may take us a little bit of time. We do have a slight waiting list, but we will make sure that your needs are addressed. The next two bullets that you see are much more in-depth levels of technical assistance that we offer, again, at the request of an agency only. Critical response is for very targeted technical assistance for agencies that have gone through a very high-profile event or a major incident. The idea is not only to examine what was done and what to improve upon for the future, but then to disseminate those findings to the field, sort of as a lessons learned, best practices sort of thing. And organizational assessment is very in-depth. That can be a year or more of on-site assessment, looking at your agency, sort of a top to bottom, look at your agency and the issues, any systemic issues, any long-term concerns that your agency has in terms of its operations, procedures, everything like that. Community policing development. These grants are some of the more innovative, promising practices grants that we have, looking at new approaches, looking at new ways to address crime and prevention of crime. In 2023, the funding was very clearly demarcated in the appropriations as to which areas we could fund. So in 2023, our CPD funding went towards crisis intervention. We have a crisis intervention teams program, de-escalation training, funding for accreditation programs, helping agencies gain accreditation. Our microgrants funding, which is seed money for small scale pilot projects, thinking about $100,000 each maybe, where you've got an idea of a practice that you'd love to put into play and some new approach, some idea you'd like to test out, and you just don't have the money to get it started. This is seed money for that. And the idea is the successful ones go on to become sort of demonstration sites, and we report out on those to the field so that they are aware of the practices out there that are working. We do fund a training provider to make tolerance, diversity, and anti-bias training available to the field. That's the last of those critical topics. And again, everything will be announced by the end of September. Similar to Valor, the COPS office offers the Law Enforcement Mental Health and Wellness Act program. We're very proud to offer this to assist law enforcement. We know what they go through on a daily basis. Anything that we can do to make things easier for them, we're proud to offer. So under LIMWA, which is the acronym that we use for this program, it's to create or improve mental health and wellness services for officers. And that can take on a variety of forms. It can be suicide prevention programming. It can be officer family services, stress reduction, peer mentoring. That's up to each agency to decide on the approach that's right for them in their application. And it's not just for officers. It can also incorporate civilian staff, dispatch or crime scene processors, any others that might experience trauma on a regular basis. This is not a program, the Preparing for Active Shooter Situations or PASS training. It's not a program you can apply for, but we provide funding to one training provider who in the past has been ALERT, the Advanced Law Enforcement Rapid Response Training at Texas State University. They're really the gold star for active shooter training, and they will make available to your agency active shooter training. Some agencies take the approach, they gather together in a sort of a regional structure, and ALERT sends trainers out on site to train a group of agencies at once. You can also travel to ALERT in Texas and go through the training there, but it is no cost active shooter training, and it's cross-disciplinary, so it's not just law enforcement, it's also fire and EMS. As I mentioned earlier, we do have an online training portal. It's got an ever-growing number of classes that can be used just for an officer's interest. It can be used during roll call to train a group of officers at once. It can be used as training classes for in-service training. And the website is listed there, but it's been growing. I know that it's far exceeded 25. This 25,000 was for 2022. I know it's already exceeded that for 2023. And again, it's at no cost to an agency. I'm going to repeat a few things you've already heard about preparing to apply just because of its importance. Please do not, when the applications are posted, and we will make it available on our website, and you can sign up on our website for Gov delivery alerts to find out when they're available. Grants.gov will send things out, but please start the application process well before the deadline. These can be a little bit time consuming to get through. Our applications are done in 2 pieces, through grants.gov first, then through the Just Grants Justice application system. So it does take time. So really, these all come to pay attention to the timelines, and please start your application early and save it frequently. And we've got some sites on there for some tutorials and online tips. And just our website, you can access all of our social media, our phone number. We've got a response center that you call them and explain what you need. They will get you to the right person. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much. Happy to answer any questions that you put in the chat or Q&A.
Thank you very much. And I'll turn it over to Kyle Bryant with the EPA.
And good afternoon, and thank you for having me. Thank you to Congressman. Thank you to the Congressman and the staff for having me on to present for EPA. I'm trying to pull up my slides right now. Forgive me for that. And what I'll be presenting on is helpful tips for finding potential grant opportunities. This is an abbreviated version of a much more extensive presentation, and trying to get to the place where I could see the slide screen. Let's see, maybe it's down here. I can use this one. Okay. As I said, I'm J. Kyle Bryant. I am a senior environmental protection specialist with EPA Region 4, headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia. I work in the Environmental Justice and Children's Health section. And I like to say for community-based organizations, what we have found is that if you have an interest in finding funding for whatever your project may be, whatever aspect of the community you're involved with, we encourage you to first establish a common vision. We find that many communities oftentimes don't know what they don't know. And so they have a passion for something and they just jump into the deep end of the pool, and they often don't consider what other resources or other entities might exist in their same community that have similar interests and might have that base covered. So we encourage you to establish a common vision and be inclusive in your thinking. Invite a diversity of opinions and perspectives, which could consist of city officials, the business community, educators, local schools, and lay citizens, and think outside the box and think broadly about what it is you're trying to champion and how others might be able to participate in that same process. Some initial questions you might want to consider are, have we left any vital stakeholders out? Is our focus too narrow or too broad? And what are some of the unique or interesting facts about our community/town and its history? Especially if you're looking for a redevelopment type of project, or to revitalize or repurpose or rebrand a part of town. Think also about who else could benefit from your proposed ideas. Are there other neighboring communities that could benefit from the same program that you're trying to implement, or neighboring cities or towns or even counties that could also tie into your project by casting a broader net, or regional industries and interests? These are some methods to assess your community needs, or 10 of them that I'd like to highlight for you. One is to examine statistics from different sources, either conduct surveys, or hold or attend community meetings from other groups to find out how they're being engaged or how they're visioning and viewing the community's issues. Solicit input from the impacted population, say for the community that you're planning to serve, through interviews and focus group meetings, and review existing or similar studies of the types of projects that you're considering implementing. You could also interview the business community and or faith-based organizations to get their perspective on your ideas. You can go to city council meetings and county commissioner meetings and things like that. Chamber of Commerce meetings are also a great resource of information where you can meet people who would be able to sort of evaluate your ideas to see if you might want to tweak them before actually going after a fundable proposal. You can meet with other subject matter experts on the topic of interest that you're focused on, say if it's an environmental issue, or if you're interested in a citywide recycling program or something like that. Or if you're interested in something like, introducing some new service to the schools, like in South Fulton, in the area that I live here, in the Atlanta area, there's been this rapid growth of Amazon facilities all around this part of the South Metro area. And so there is an interest in some parts of the community to see if these transportation hubs and these supply chain hubs would be interested in facilitating some sort of pipeline program from the local high schools to look at jobs once they matriculate through high school, because everyone doesn't go to college. And for those who aren't interested in college, they can still find meaningful employment at some of these facilities that are popping up by the dozens in this part of town. If there was some sort of feeder program that introduced young people at an earlier age to supply chain management and logistics kind of education as educational modules. So something to consider. You can also review literature or information on the internet, interview professionals who work with the target population, and establish a list of professional associations and key stakeholders to make them aware of your interests. Like there might be a business league, or like I said, chambers of commerce, or a ministerial alliance that might be a good resource to talk to get their inputs. In case you didn't know, if the Environmental Protection Agency is involved with a cleanup site near your community, there may be an opportunity to apply for agency funding to address other environmental or capacity building concerns. One of them is called TASK. TASK stands for Technical Assistance Services for Communities contract. It's not a grant, it's a contract. And it's an EPA-sponsored program to provide independent educational technical assistance. It's different from EPA's Technical Assistance Grant, which is a program that is designed for Superfund site communities. And a Superfund site is just a site where the EPA has designated it as a hazardous waste site that is being cleaned up by the EPA. And so any site that's identified as a Superfund site is eligible for these technical assistance grants, which is where you can hire a technical professional to help the impacted community interpret and understand what the EPA is doing, and make technical presentations and take technical reports that are generated by the agency and make them more palatable for the community. And that can be done through the creation of newsletters or palm cards or fact sheets and things that explains what they're doing and how long it'll take and the level of impact one can expect. These services are provided under the TASK program by a subcontractor known as SKIO Solutions. Some other services that the TASK contract provides is informational assistance, community education, technical expertise, and technical assistance needs evaluation and plan development. Now, the technical assistance needs evaluation goes back to what I was referring to when I was talking about communities often don't know what they don't know. So if you have a community-based organization and you are trying to champion the community's concerns around, say, a cleanup site or a landfill or some issue like that, sometimes you need an outside organization to evaluate your organization's capacity to manage such a task. And so that's what the task services can help provide. Under this needs assessment or needs evaluation, subject matter experts can come into your organization and find out through simple discussions with you about, do you have like a bookkeeper on staff? Do you have people with accounting skills to manage your books? Have you applied for grants before? If not, maybe that's something that has intimidated you, and so they can get you training in that area so that you can be more educated on how to apply for grants and feel more comfortable about establishing a budget and writing your own budget and actually pursuing proposals because of that training. I encourage you to seek funding that complements your vision. So no one grant alone will satisfy all your goals for redevelopment. So instead, seek grant opportunities that can be combined to address specific needs or projects for your community. In other words, you want to put together a funding strategy like this funding pie here. This pie chart shows how if you have a big idea on, say, how you want to rebrand a historic neighborhood and restore the housing stock and do some streetscaping and all of that, one agency might not have the grant funding to address all of those concerns. So you would look to collaborate with different organizations in your community and say, go after the funding that is appropriate for that particular project from the Environmental Protection Agency, and another pot of money from, say, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, if it happens to be a rural community, or the Economic Development Administration, if it has some economic redevelopment aspects to it, or job creation, or the Department of Transportation, if you want to look at streetscaping or building a gateway entrance to your community, or have street lighting or sidewalks or bike paths and things like that constructed. Or the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, if it has a residential component where you're planning on, say, putting new siding on old dilapidated housing or offering low interest grants for people to get loans who can't get traditional bank loans to get a new roof on their house and things like that. And the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, who has great workshops and funding for visioning workshops where you can bring people together to build consensus around common issues, almost similar to how churches have like a rendering for the building fund for churches and things like that. You can have people do renderings for how you propose to do some streetscaping and revitalize a community or a whole neighborhood or parts of town, and have a visioning session around what everyone will agree to that it should look like in the final picture. As far as EPA's grants and resources, these are a few. And as other people have mentioned, we're in the fourth quarter of our fiscal year. And so the same is true for our agency. So all of these grants have passed now, but they're similar in that they will reoccur in the next fiscal year. Our fiscal year starts in October 1, and these grants start coming out in the November through March timeframe. The newest grant that we are offering now, of which I am the Region 4 project officer for here in the Southeast US, is the Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers, or TICTACs. Collectively, there's $177 million in nationwide funding. And in our region, Region 4, the 8 southeastern states, we have 2 TICTAC centers that will be operating. They're currently onboarding now, and we're finishing their funding recommendations. So they'll get their monies awarded sometime in September, and they'll be open for business. But the Research Triangle Institute is one of them. They're housed in Durham, North Carolina, but they service all 8 Region 4 states. The Region 4 states are as far north as Kentucky, as far west as Mississippi, and the Gulf and Atlantic coast of the Southeast US. The other center is the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice, and they're based in New Orleans, Louisiana, which is EPA Region 6. We're sharing that center with the Region 6 states. So we do have 2 centers, and each of these centers has spokes, if you will. So it's a hub and spoke model. So these hubs have spokes in each of our states. So for instance, the Research Triangle Institute has partnerships with the University of Georgia for the state of Georgia. And the Deep South Center has partnerships with Spelman College for the state of Georgia. For each of these grants, by the way, the Research Triangle Institute has a $10 million grant to be spent over 5 years. And the Deep South Center for EJ, for Environmental Justice, has a $13 million grant that will last over 5 years. And they got a little bit more because they're servicing 2 regions of the country, Region 4 and Region 6, as I mentioned. We also offer environmental justice small grants. They used to only be $50,000 for each community that applied. And now they've been bumped up to $100,000, which you can do a lot more with. It's usually a 2 to 3 year grant, and that's $100,000 over that 3-year period. And it's for any number of environmental justice programming, trainings, train the trainer events, where communities want to build the capacity of their communities to understand the environmental issues that are impacting them. We also have environmental education grants. Some community organizations want to work with schools and introduce STEM curriculum and other environmental programs, whether it be asthma trigger awareness or any number of trainings that have an environmental arm to it, like air quality issues. Environmental education grants can support those kinds of initiatives. We also have environmental justice collaborative problem solving grants, which follows the EPA's collaborative problem solving 7-step process. And those grants are $500,000 each. Next, we offer children's environmental health program resources. Most of these grants aren't monetary, but they offer other resources, say for daycares that are operating near contaminated communities or in impoverished communities. There's or areas where we know that there are higher incidences of childhood asthma or high lead levels. Then there are children's health program resources to educate those child care facilities and schools about how to be more protective of the students that attend those facilities. Next, we have children's environmental health program resources. Oh, that's what I just said. And then we have brownfields grants. Brownfields, if you're not familiar with that term, is an EPA term for any commercial or industrial property that has known or perceived contamination. The operative word there is perceived. Basically, it's like if you have a abandoned gas station that's been abandoned for 20 years or more, or just been an eyesore in your community, and the city government or county government can apply for these funds to say, we're going to do something about this. Because if it's been abandoned for that long, people might be afraid to purchase it and redevelop it because they think tanks may be left in the ground and they might inherit the liability of cleaning all of that up on their dime. Well, the Brownfields program is designed for cities to offer money to clean up these sites so that developers can come in and turn it into something useful. Like it could, they could totally redevelop the site and put up an economic node of stores, or something like Atlantic Station that most of you are familiar with in downtown Atlanta was a large brownfield site. It used to be the site of the Atlantic Steel site. And through creative financing and through use of brownfields funding, the city was able to use monies to help spur economic development around that main attraction that exists now. As far as the Economic Development Administration is concerned, they had funding like the Make It in America Challenge, the Economic Development Assistance Program, and Planning and Local Technical Assistance Programs. These all spur job creation in communities that might have any number of brownfields or where a mill used to exist and they went belly up and left the town abandoned. And now that was the primary job creator for a community. So this helps spur economic activity again in communities that have lost like their main employer. As far as the U.S. Department of Agriculture or USDA, they have grants such as Rural Community Development Initiative grants, Rural Business Enterprise grants, and Rural Business Opportunity grants. These grants can be used for doing things like they have a rural distance telemedicine grant for many of these rural communities that don't have a hospital. They may have an urgent care center, but there's a need for telemedicine services. Or if a community is usually a 30-minute drive or 30 miles away from the nearest hospital, usually those are the criteria to make them eligible to apply for the distance telemedicine grants. These grants can also be used to help bolster the development of fiber optics and broadband connectivity for many of our rural communities. And that was a big deal during COVID, where many of the rural communities just lacked online accessibility and the capacity to get internet access on a consistent basis. So people and students who lived in these rural communities couldn't just log on to Zoom classes or go online to keep up with the education. So you can create work hubs and teleworking hubs in rural communities through grants that the USDA offers. Next, we have the Department of Transportation, which offers TIGER grants, which stands for Transportation Investment Generating Economic Recovery grants. And then they have National Infrastructure Investments and National Scenic Byways Discretionary Grants. And that's where if you live in a rural community, say, or you have a state highway that goes through your small town, and you're in one of those small towns that has very few traffic lights, and you need to create some way for people to recognize that you exist. Well, many towns utilize this byways discretionary grant to do things like they did Tara Boulevard in the metro Atlanta area. It extends from Clayton County all the way from the Atlanta airport, which is the busiest airport in the world. Tara Boulevard is Georgia State Highway 1941, and it extends all the way down through central Georgia, all the way down to it meets up with the Golden Isles Parkway, which extends all the way to Brunswick, Georgia. It's the old way to get to the coast of Georgia from Atlanta before there was an interstate system. And so from Tara Boulevard from Clayton County all the way down to Middle Georgia and Fort Valley, which is Peach County, they call it the Peach Blossom Trail. And so they've taken parts of that state highway and lined it with peach blossom trees and things like that. So it makes it more scenic, and it makes people want to take the scenic route to get to the coast or to get to central Georgia rather than getting on the interstate. So this is creative ways you can work with all of the counties that it passes through to beautify it and make it a way to steer traffic through your less traveled area. Other potential resources to consider are the ATSDR grants. ATSDR is an acronym for the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry. Essentially, they're the public health arm, a sister agency of the EPA. They address public health concerns at cleanup sites, and they do public health assessments and consultations around health-related matters and chronic illnesses and things like that. You can also look for funding information from community foundations. Here in the Atlanta area, we have the Greater Atlanta Community Foundation. You have one for almost each municipality and county in the state. And of course, Georgia has 159 counties. So there's plenty of community foundations to go around. One thing to know about community foundations is their grants are not as I guess, hard to apply for. Many community foundation grants are like 2-page applications, and you can get anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000 from a community foundation, which is good if you want to like introduce a mailer campaign to mail out fact sheets or postcards about what your organization is about or what kind of services you're offering to your community. So I would think of that as low-hanging fruit and something you should consider. Also, there are private foundations outside of the federal realm that might have similar interests to what you're interested in, like the Kellogg Foundation, the Norman Foundation, and here in the Metro Atlanta area, the Blank Foundation. For instance, they have an interest in environmental issues. Also, they have an interest in educational issues. So you can look at private foundations for that. And I would encourage you to use the Foundation Center. The Foundation Center is a repository of public and private funding organizations. And there are only 6 foundation centers in the US, and one of them is housed in downtown Atlanta. So what can you do personally? You can attend public meetings like city council meetings or Chamber of Commerce meetings to find out what's going on. Keep your ear to the ground and the network. You can build a network of stakeholders with people who are influential in your community so that they know your face and your name and know you are passionate about what you're advocating for. You can educate yourself more about the issues that you are trying to confront and think outside the box about how to broaden your network and work with other groups that you may not have traditionally thought would be an ally of yours. And that's my brief presentation, and I'll turn it back over to the host. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to our district director, Kathy.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for the information that each of you have provided. It's just been absolutely wonderful. I've listened into all 3 days, and I'm sure for those individuals who participated in the 3-day workshop forum, I'm sure that you all have gotten some very valuable information. So without prolonging, I'm going to go ahead and get started with some questions. There were quite a few questions that pertained to Mr. Becker's presentation, but anyone who participated on the call is welcome to speak up and to respond. So starting with the very first question, let's see here. A caller wants to know what the requirements are to provide temporary housing for homeless veterans with children, and what's the best way to get started from A to Z for this nonprofit and homeless HUD housing. Mr. Becker, are you still on the call? Candace, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. So it does look like he's here, but he may have stepped away from his desk.
Okay, all right. So is there anyone else that would like to respond to that, to those questions? If not, I'll move on. Okay, this question I believe is for probably for the Department of Justice. Could you talk a bit about EEOP rules and when those are required? In my agency, the second largest full service police department in Georgia is precluded from applying for many DOJ grants due to the EEOP requirement. Specifically, I'm referring to the Equal Employment Opportunity Plan compliance requirements defined in 28 CFR Part 42.
Sure. This is Vince Davenport. That was a really good question. I've been in this job for almost 8 years. I've never heard of that being an impediment to applying for a grant. I'm not saying that it's not, but it's a very, very rare circumstance. I think the requirement just says that you, like, as an employer, you have to have an EOP plan, you have to have an equal opportunity employment plan. And so if there's something more like detailed about that, or maybe there's something particular about this jurisdiction, just email me and I'll try to help, disentangle this, because I've never heard about this stopping anybody from ever like receiving money in real life. So it's new to me.
And this is Cheryl Thomas chiming in from COPS. Don't seem to be able to start my video again, but I put an answer when the same question appeared in the Q&A. I put an answer in there. There are some differences on who needs to apply and how. Oh, now I can start my video. There seems to be some differences. I put a link in the Q&A on how the COPS standards are set up. All of our EEOP work is actually done through the Office of Justice Programs, Office on Civil Rights. So they handle it for all three components, I believe. But the link that I've got in the Q&A should be able to help, I hope.
Thank you. There was another question about what is the contact information for state administrators?
I put a link under the Q&A for it is different for different agencies. Different agencies administer different state administrators administer different programs. I put a link in there for all of the OJP administrators with a map.
Okay. And this one was directly for you, Mr. Davenport. How can we apply to the grants that Vince Davenport is talking about, particularly the mental health and substance abuse ones?
Well, I put a link under that question as well to our funding page, but you can, if you don't want to go through the funding page, you can email me and I'll hook you up. I'll let you know.
Ms. Thomas, did you want to you have anything you want to add to that?
No, that doesn't actually relate to the COPS office grants.
Okay. For the Southeast Crescent Regional Commission's State Economic and Infrastructure Development Grant Program, when is the pre-application deadline? And if we have already missed it, does that preclude from applying? Learned about this from the Congressman's email list. Thanks. So I don't know if that, I know you all indicated that the most of your grant expiration dates have already expired, and that you all will have funding again when the new budget is passed. But can you all respond to that?
Sure. So I did answer that already, and I let them know that the pre-application due date is September the 15th at 5 p.m. The full grant application opens on November the 6th at 12 p.m. and the deadline is December the 15th at 5 p.m.
All
Yeah,
right.
can I add one thing to that? So you're right. A lot of these grant programs have closed for this funding cycle, but these funding cycles are starting back up again too. So they're all starting back up again. So in the next few months, you'll see new opportunities pop up all over the place for a lot of these programs.
Right. That's right around the corner, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. There was one individual, I think, that tried to access a permission link. And I think that was for the Office of Violence Against Women. And they're saying that they were denied access to the server. Is Linda still on the call?
Linda had to go. I think she put in the chat that she had an emergency call, but I provided the public link to sign up for email updates. If you scroll up, my name is Erica Lacey. You can sign up for email updates at the public.gov delivery link that I provided in the chat.
Mhm.
And then I also provided the link to sign up for peer review.
Okay. So that all of that will be posted for individuals who are still on the call. All of that will be posted on the Congressman's website within the next few days. And also a recording of today's event will also be posted on the Congressman's website. There's another question about, let's see, our nonprofit is trying to find funding for young adult disabled minorities who have matriculated from secondary school and who do not qualify for admission to post-secondary educational institutions. We are interested in exposing them to STEM activities, workshops that give them continued opportunities to hone academic and daily living skills in areas where they may not have been exposed. It seems hard to find grants that we qualify for because we are not an academic institution. Is there help in this area for us?
So I answered that as well in the chat. I provided my email address, which is Candice, KANDICE .williams@mail.house.gov. And I let them know to reach out to me, and then I will take a look to see what grants may be available for them.
Okay, and I was thinking maybe Mr. Bryant might have something to add to that. Are you still on the call, Mr. Bryant?
Kathy, this is Jason.
I am.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I would just say that it sounds like it's a situation where they would be best advised to look at a pool of grant opportunities. It's not going to be one grant that will satisfy that, but there are. I would look for first of all, I would encourage them to look for other service providers who service that same demographic. Those young people with developmental challenges or what have you, and look at what services are offered currently by them and have them contact them and find out who they apply to grants for, or have they applied for grants, or state that they have a subpopulation that has a critical need, and talk with them about what is available, and maybe going after a larger pool of money, maybe for that larger institution to apply for those services, and then bring those students in under that. You just have to be creative about how you approach funding if you don't know all of the resources that exist. The best rule of thumb is to find people that do similar work that have been in existence longer than you, and find out how they get funding. That would be my first offering.
Thank you. Mr.
Kathy.
Howard? Yes.
Sorry,
Go
this is
ahead.
Jason Becker at HUD. So
Oh.
those types of services would fall under CDBG's public service. We have a 50% cap. So public service is a very broad category. So as long as it does serve the public, those grants don't directly come from us. They go through our entitlement communities. So DeKalb County or the state, which would service the congressman's congressional district, individual organizations can apply when that entitlement community opens up their process for public service dollars. So that is a way they can do it. So you just have to be an eye out for DeKalb County or the state of Georgia when they do open those things and put an application together for them.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Becker, did you respond to, there was several questions in the chat. Did you see those?
I'm looking right now.
Okay, one is HUD and the YHDP are for nonprofits, or are those also, or can cities also apply for those grants?
Cities can apply as well, especially the smaller cities that are not entitlement communities. A lot of our small cities will apply to programs like that, or through the state's program, because we provide funding to the state that's not entitlement community. So all those other places that aren't, DeKalb, Atlanta, Columbus, those sort of things. So if you're a smaller city, you can apply as well.
Okay, and then there's one that's we provide temporary housing for homeless families with children, some who are youth. Is it possible for us to apply for the YDHP grant?
You can, and it's one of those things that, as was spoken about before, and I didn't get into it, having everything together, having, making sure 501c3 status is together. You've had your audits if you're getting over a certain amount of money, that sort of thing. Having those together, so when the opportunity comes up, you can write that grant together and put everything forward to have a better opportunity. They're always looking for new organizations that provide those services. We're trying to have outreach out in the community. So if you are a nonprofit organization that does provide those services, one, there's that youth grant you can look at, and the second one is applying for those COC grants that are through the continuum of care. So DeKalb County has their one, and then for like Rockdale County, that sort of thing, it would be through the state COC program. So there's additional funding opportunities that way.
Okay, and the last one is, I believe this person is asking if single family housing, if you can get grants for single family housing sales to provide housing for veterans and for homeless individuals?
So there's a variety of different programs that do that. One of them, we actually just had a meeting this morning that we're trying to close out. That's the Neighborhood Stabilization Program. That's actually been around since 2008, 2009. And those are working with cities and the state who have that funding. We're trying to close it out. The kind of the hard part right now with single family housing, because we have a task to provide housing to low income individuals and families, is finding a property that is inexpensive enough where you can do rehab on it and still sell it to a family that's going to be able to afford it. There are other opportunities out there for rehab. Some cities and states as well, through us, as I mentioned, through the CDBG program and the home program, do have grants that you can work through them. You basically put a proposal together for you to acquire property, rehab, and then sell to a low-income individual or family. And those would be either, again, entitlement communities like DeKalb County, City of Atlanta, or through the state of Georgia.
Okay, all right. There's an individual who's asking Mr. Bryant to please put up his contact information again. So if you could please do that, Mr. Bryant, that'd be great. And then it looks like if you haven't already answered this question, Mr. Becker, someone is asking what are the requirements to provide temporary housing for homeless veterans with children? That's for you, Mr. Becker.
Yes, ma'am. So the requirements would be, I don't want to say it depends. If you're gonna work through a program like that and have it, you would have a separate unit. We have quality standards we have. So the organization that would be getting the grant and or the city that you would get the money through goes out and makes a quality assurance inspection to make sure that the house is safe, the unit is safe, and that it's habitable for a family. And then you kind of go that way. When we talk about things like HUD-VASH, that is handled directly to the client. But then we have other organizations that will specialize in just providing housing to veterans and or veterans and their families. And so it'd be the same way if you were providing housing to low-income families. You'd have the same standards. It's just that you, as an organization, might specialize just in handling individuals that are veterans or veterans and their families. So there's not much difference at all.
I want to thank you all again for participating in today's call. And now I'd like to turn it over to our Chief of Staff, Marcus Gaza. Marcus, are you there?
Thanks, Kathy. I'm trying to unmute. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today on day 3 of our grants workshop during Congressman Johnson's annual Week of Hope. Again, my name is Marcus Garza. I'm the Congressman's Chief of Staff here in our Washington, D.C. office. I just want to give a special thank you to today's wonderful presenters, Jason Becker, Linda Phan, Vince Davenport, Cheryl Thomas, and Kyle Bryant for sharing their agency's perspective and best practices on the grant process, as well as potential funding opportunities that are available for nonprofit partners. Again, we know we keep sharing a lot of great information with you, so I just want to reiterate once again that we will make every presentation available for our 4-day workshop series, and all the materials will be made available on the Congressman's website sometime next week. Once they are posted, you can find them under the Serving You tab at the top of our homepage at hankjohnson.house.gov. One finally reminder to join us again tomorrow for our 4th and final series of our grants workshop, which will focus on understanding the community project funding process. This new process has restored congressional directed spending, or as many often refer to it as earmarks, to all members of Congress and senators, so they have a greater say in where federal funding is spent in their districts. So tomorrow's presenter will be Congressman Johnson's Legislative Director, Hala Kaiser, who will be sharing everything you need to know on understanding this process, how you can start preparing for your projects for consideration now before this process kicks off early again next year. With that, this concludes today's presentation. Thanks again for joining us. Have a great rest of your day, and we will see you at 1 p.m. tomorrow.
Thank you.